והושיענו במצוות סוף, וציוונו לקרוא יסלם. אמן. ברוך Good evening, how's everybody doing? A good Vok Shavua Tov, a good week to you. We're starting the week off right by learning Motzi Shabbos. As soon as we can, we dive right in. Let's light up the darkness. That, by the way, was Moshe Storch leading us in a Hallel, which we do every Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a Hebrew month. That one was from 4 years ago. I love playing music, but I'm telling you, when I use pre-recorded music like I did Keep Alive yesterday, I just, get these notifications from Facebook and YouTube that it's a problem. But what I'm going to try to do is just use my own recordings. And in fact, tonight there's going to be a kumsitz here in our neighborhood with a great singer named Betzalel Levin, and then at 12:30 a.m., it's a tradition, right, on that first opportunity you get in the week before Rosh Hashanah, we have Slichos, the penitential prayers. That's going to be led by our rabbi, Rav Yekusiel Kalmanson, at 12:30 a.m. tonight. So I'm going to try to make some recordings of that, and then I'll have some music that I can share during the countdown that I recorded in our community, and hopefully I'm not going to get notices from Facebook and YouTube questioning my rights to use it. Anyway, who's in the house on a Saturday night? Sharon just got back from Slichas. Nancy in North Carolina, Bella in Florida, Karen in Northern California, Ryan in Jacksonville, Paul in the Great Northwest, Melissa in Great Neck. Paul, the new year is almost upon us, wishing blessings and fresh starts for everyone. Amen. Ella says shalom. Michelle says shalom. Welcome, everybody. Our daf tonight, page 27, Chaf Zion, here in Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. We are currently discussing Mishna number 5, right? Mishna number 5 here in chapter 1. Which has to do, continuing the discussion of acquisition, modes of acquisition. We discussed how a Hebrew slave was acquired, how a Canaanite slave was acquired, how livestock is acquired. And now we're talking about land and movable property. And we were asking the question yesterday, if you're going to bundle movable property with land, because there are modes of acquisition, formal acquisition, when the buyer actually, receives acquisition of the land that he is purchasing, which are available for land that are not available for movable property. But you can bundle movable property with land, and then the acquisition of the land will bring with it the movable property. And the question that was asked was, does the movable property that's going to be transferred from the seller to the buyer and is going to be bundled with a piece of land, even a tiny piece of land for this purpose, does the movable property actually have to be situated on that piece of land for the mode of acquisition that's only available for land to also take hold of the movable property? Does the movable property have to be literally, physically on that piece of land? Or can it be a legal relationship that these two things are bundled together so that the buyer is able to acquire both the land and the movable property at the same time? Come and hear a proof, and it was not resolved yesterday whether it has to be piled there or not. So come and hear a proof from the following Mishna, Tractate Meiser Sheni. There was an incident involving Rabban Gamliel and other elders who were traveling on a ship. Rabban Gamliel said to the elders, 1/10 of produce that I will measure out and separate in the future from the produce of my fields, that was at the bottom of 26b, now we're on 27a, is given as first tithe to Yehoshua ben Hananiah, who was a Levite. And the place of the tithe is rented to him so that he can acquire the tithe by means of the land. Right? So you're saying, Rabban Gamliel is saying, I plan to separate this tithe in the future, and I'm going to give it to Yehoshua ben Hananiah, who was a Levite, right? So there's the first 2% for a Cohen, the next 10% of the produce for a Levite, and the following 10% in certain years is the poor man's tithe, which is given to the poor. So he's not able to hand it over to the Levite, to Yehoshua ben Hananiah at that moment. It doesn't even exist yet, but he's, okay, so he's, first of all, we're saying he's allowed to separate it in the future, but also that he's going to transfer possession of that tithe, the 10% of his produce, not by handing it to Yehoshua ben Hananiah, but by renting him for this purpose the land on which that tithe is going to be sitting. Okay? And now he's going to talk about the poor man's tithe. And another tenth I will measure out in the future as the poor man's tithe. And this is given to Akiva ben Yosef, that's Rabbi Akiva, so that he will acquire it on behalf of the poor, because Rabbi Akiva was a collector of charity for the poor, not because he was poor himself once he was a rabbi. And its place is rented to him. Same idea. For the poor man's tithe, I'm renting this piece of property, this piece of land, to Rabbi Akiva so that he can acquire the poor man's tithe, receive all this tithe, and then he'll distribute it to the poor. Now, one can learn from this incident that we require the movable property, in this case the produce of the tithe, to be piled on the land, as Rabban Gamliel emphasized its place. So the Gemara rejects this argument. It is different there, as Rabban Gamliel did this so as not to trouble the sages to whom he was giving the tithes, by forcing them to transport the tithes to different location. For reasons of convenience, he transferred to the other sages ownership of the land where the tithes were already situated. But that doesn't prove that the produce has to be, or that the movable property has to be situated on the land that is being bundled with, just that it was done in that instance. So the Gemara further suggests Ta Shma, right? Ta Shma coming here. It's just this formulation. We hear this all the time, but here there's a note about it this time, right? Ta Shma, Aramaic. This phrase introduces a quotation from a Mishna, a Baraisa, or even a biblical verse to serve as proof for an opinion under discussion, or as a resolution to a problem that the Gemara has been discussing. It can also serve to preface a difficulty with a proposed opinion. If the proof is sound, the Gemara will state its acceptance with the phrase, learn from it that this is so, at the end of the discussion, right? So until we hear learn from it that it is so, we haven't resolved the issue. But here is a compelling proof, right? Come in here. So, the Gemara further suggests, come in here, a solution for this dilemma. As Rav Bar Yitzchak says that Rav says, there are two types of documents. If one says, acquire this field for so-and-so, and write the document for him as proof of the sale of the field, so he can retract his agreement with regard to the document, right? The seller can change his mind and tell them not to write the document. But he cannot retract his agreement with regard to the field, as the buyer has already acquired it. By contrast, if the seller said, acquire this field for so-and-so, on the condition that you write him a document, if the document has not yet been given, he can retract his agreement both with regard to the document and with regard to the field, as he transfers the field to him only on the condition that he writes a document. Now, how does this prove whether or not movable property that is bundled for the purpose of acquisition with real property has to be piled on top of it or not? Stay tuned. And Rav Chia bar Avin said that Rav Huna said there are actually 3 types of documents. 2 types are those that we said, and the other type is as follows. If the seller first wrote him the document, as a seller can write a bill of sale before the transaction and give it when he receives payment. And this is, as we learned in a Mishna, Tractate Bava Basra, page 167b. A scribe may write a deed of sale for the seller of property who requests one, even if the purchaser is not with him when he presents his request. In a case of this kind, once the buyer takes possession of the land from him, the document is acquired by the buyer wherever it is, even if it is not in the possession of the buyer. And one can learn from here that we do not require that the property be piled, the movable property be piled on the real property, as in this case, the document is acquired by means of the land, no matter where the document is located. So what they're saying is, here we're saying that a document is bundled with the land that it's referring to when there's a purchase and sale of the land, and the document could be somewhere else, not on the land, and the purchaser is going to acquire both the document and the land at the same time. So this would seem to indicate a proof that the movable property does not have to be piled on the land. But can you see a problem with this argument? I mean, is a document like other movable property? Document is a kind of movable property, but a document represents so much more than the paper that it is written on, right? And the Gemara rejects this proof. A document is different, as it is the bridle of the land, since the document that refers to the land is the means by which one takes possession of the land. It is considered as though the document is part of the land. Therefore, one can take possession of the document by means of the land without it actually having to be placed there. The same does not necessarily apply to other movable property, which does not refer specifically to the land, right? You can't say that a document which is actually talking about the land and the purchase and sale of the land is the same as a stack of wine barrels. Of course, it's a different nature of these types of movable property. So the Gemara asks, but it was taught concerning this law that a document can effect acquisition wherever it is located. And this is what we learned in the Mishnah. Property that does not serve as a guarantee, that's movable property, can be acquired along with property that serves as a guarantee, that's real property, by means of giving money, by means of giving a document, or by means of taking possession of them. And this indicates that there is no difference between a document and other types of movable property. Consequently, one can learn from here that we do not require that the property be piled on the land. And the Gemara affirms one can learn from here that this is so. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Do we require that one who sells movable property by means of land state explicitly that this was his intention or not? So the Gemara suggests, come in here, as those aforementioned Baraisas teach all these laws of acquiring movable property through land, and they do not teach the expression by means of. This indicates that it is not necessary to specify this aspect of the acquisition. And the Gemara rejects this proof. And according to your reasoning, is it taught that he must say to him, acquire it? The Baraisas do not state this, and yet everyone agrees that the seller must say to him that he should acquire the land. Rather, one must say that the acquisition is not effective unless he says, acquire it. And yet the Tana did not deem it necessary to mention this requirement. And here too, the acquisition is not effective unless he says by means of. In other words, if you're saying that you're going to acquire this movable property by means of it being bundled, legally speaking, with this land that's being acquired at the same time, you actually have to state that you're acquiring the movable property by means of the real property that I'm transferring to you. The requirement is not mentioned here because these Baraisas do not discuss the type of statements that he must issue, but simply are referring to the basic underlying legal issues. And the Gemara concludes, and the halacha is that we do not require that the property be piled on the land, but we do require that the seller say that he is transferring the movable property by means of the land, and he must also say, acquire it, right? You hereby acquire it, right? It's that kind of performative language. Like when you say the words "I promise," you're not just saying words, you're creating, a relationship or an obligation at the time that you say the words. Likewise, acquire it, right? When you say those words coupled with these other actions, then, it happens. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If a seller wishes to give a field in the form of a sale, and with it movable property as a gift. Okay, so I'm selling the land and I'm gifting the movable property. Now, that's two different types of transactions. Can those be bundled together? What is the law? Can he transfer them together by means of a transaction performed with the land? And the Gemara suggests, come and hear a proof for this dilemma from the incident involving Rabban Gamliel that we saw on the ship, where he was going to give his tithe in the future by way of land that he was renting. He said, 1/10 of the produce that I will measure out in the future is given to Yehoshua, and its place is rented to him. So learn from this that even if the field is rented, which is the equivalent of a sale, and the tithe is given as a gift, one can transfer the two together. So it seems like you can couple a gift of movable property to a sale of real property, or renting, which is the same. Another dilemma was raised before the sages. If one wishes to give a field to one person and the movable property to a different person, then what is the law? Can one transfer movable property to one person by means of land that is going to be gifted to a different person? So the Gemara suggests, come and hear that which Rabban Gamliel stated. 1/10 of that which I will measure out in the future is given to Rabbi Akiva, right, to Akiva ben Yosef, so that he will acquire it on behalf of the poor. And its place is rented to him. Although the gift is for the poor and the place is rented to Rabbi Akiva, the acquisition is effective. So you might think that you can sell land to one person and gift movable property to another, and that the mode of acquisition will be via land because these can be bundled together. But the Gemara rejects this proof. What is the meaning of rented in this case? It means rented for tithe. This land was not rented to Rabbi Akiva for his own use, but only so that he could receive the tithe. Therefore, the land was actually given to the poor, to whom Akiva will distribute the tithe. And if you wish, say a different refutation. Rabbi Akiva is different as he was a charity collector, and therefore he was considered like the hand of the poor. Since a charity collector collects charity on behalf of the poor, he has the status of the poor himself. If so, this cannot be compared to a case in which one transfers a certain item to one person and land to someone else. So we have not answered that question. Rava says the sages taught that one can acquire movable property by way of land only when he gives all the money for the land and the movable property. But if he did not give the money for all the property, then even if they were transferred to him, he acquires only the movable property corresponding to the money that he paid. It is taught in a Baraisa, Tosefta Ketubos 2:3, in accordance with the opinion of Rava. The power of money, in terms of acquisition, is greater than the power of a document in one way, and the power of a document is greater than the power of money in a different way. And the Baraisa elaborates, the power of money is greater in that money can be used to redeem consecrated property in second tithe, which is not the case with a document. And the power of a document is greater than the power of money, as a document releases a Jewish woman, i.e. a man can divorce his wife with a get, right, with a document of divorce, which is not the case with money. And the Baraisa continues, and furthermore, the power of each, money and a document, as a means to transfer ownership, is greater than the power of acquisition by means of taking possession. And the power of taking possession is greater than the power of acquisition of each of them, right, of money or document. How so? So the power of money or a document is greater than the power of acquisition by taking possession, as each of them affects acquisition in the case of a Hebrew slave, which is not the case for taking possession. you can't just take possession of a Hebrew slave. Money has to change hands or a document has to be given. And the power of taking possession is greater than the power of money or document as with regard to taking possession. If one sold another person 10 fields in 10 different countries, once the buyer takes possession of one of the fields, he acquires all of them. Now, this is assuming he actually bought all 10. Then the transfer of ownership moves from the seller to the buyer when the buyer actually takes possession of one of those fields. Now, in what case is this statement said, and we're on 27b, it is said in a case where he gave him money for all of the land. But if he did not give him money for all of it, he acquires only the land corresponding to the money that he paid, in accordance with the opinion of Rava. And the Gemara comments, the Baraisa supports the opinion of Shmuel. As Shmuel says, if one sold another 10 fields in 10 countries, once he takes possession of one of them, he acquires all of them. Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, said, know that this is true, as if he handed him 10 animals with one bridle and said to him, acquire them. Doesn't he acquire all of them? In this case, too, they are considered like one field. But a sage said to Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, is this comparable? Is this comparable? There, its bond, i.e. the bridle that joins the 10 animals, is in his hand. Here, in the case of 10 fields, its bond is not in his hand. Right? So are we going to really say that one who made a deal and sold 10 fields that are located in 10 different countries, they probably should have, made a document of transfer or even a symbolic exchange. But if they're going to use taking possession for the moment that the ownership transfers, can we say that when the buyer actually takes possession of one of those fields, as long as the money was paid for all 10, that's when the ownership transfers? Where did the law come out on this? If one sells 10 fields in 10 countries and the buyer takes possession of one of them, he acquires all of them. And this law applies only if the buyer paid the seller for all of the fields. If he paid him only part of the money, he acquires land corresponding only to the money he paid. If one gave the fields as a gift, the recipient acquires all of the fields. And the same is true with regard to renting. Once the tenant takes possession of one of the fields, he acquires the right to use all of them during the rental period. And here it is not necessary to pay for all of them because one is obligated to pay rental fees only at the end of the rental period. And there are those who say that Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, said no, that he did not acquire all of the fields by taking possession of only one field, as if one passed to him 10 animals with one bridle and said to him, acquire this one. Does he acquire all of them? And the same applies here when he takes possession of only one field. It is as though he said to him, acquire this one, and therefore he does not acquire the other fields in this manner. And the Gemara rejects that argument, as we saw where the law came out. Is it comparable? There, the animals are separate entities, and therefore when he says to him, acquire this one, there is no reason that the other animals should be acquired as well. So why is it that when there's 10 fields in 10 different countries, and you want to use taking possession as the mode of acquisition, and he takes possession of one of them, that then the deal is finalized and he takes possession of all of them? Why? Because fields, no matter where they are on earth, are connected by the earth. Here, the mass of the earth is one. Consequently, if he acquires one plot of land, he acquires the other plots of land along with it. New subject. The Mishna teaches, and in a legal dispute involving both land and movable property, if the defendant makes a partial admission of the claim with regard to the movable property, thereby rendering himself obligated to take an oath, this is going back to our Mishna here, number 5, right? In a legal dispute involving both land and movable property, if the defendant makes a partial admission of the claim, yes, I received money for the movable property that was bundled with the land, but I did not receive money for the land itself. That would be a partial admission. Thereby rendering himself obligated to take an oath denying any responsibility for the remaining property. Well, in this situation, the movable property binds the real property that serves as a guarantee, i.e. the land, so that he is forced to take an oath concerning the land as well, despite the fact that one is generally not obligated to take an oath for a claim that involves land. And Ula says, from where is it derived from the Torah that one can impose the extension of an oath? I.e., if one is required to take an oath for one claim, the other party can obligate him to take an oath with regard to other claims, which on their own would not lead to the imposition of an oath. Where do we see that in the Torah? As it is stated with regard to a sotah, right? The suspected adulteress. Quote, and the woman shall say, Amen, Amen. Numbers 5:22. And we learned in a Mishna tractate sotah concerning why is she saying the double expression, Amen, Amen. Right? The suspected adulteress was a wife who, was dallying in some way with another man. And her husband, it's not that she was seen committing adultery, but she put herself in a compromising situation. So there were rumors type of thing. And the husband says to his wife, do not seclude yourself with that man again. And then she secludes herself with that man so that she had the opportunity to commit adultery behind closed doors. And witnesses saw that she secluded herself with that man. So in that situation, the husband and wife now become prohibited to each other until, and this whole situation is only possible when the temple is standing in Jerusalem, which it hasn't been in 2,000 years. But when it is, so she would go to Jerusalem with the husband and a chaperone, so that because they cannot be together again until she takes this oath in Jerusalem in the temple, where they, write the verses of the sotah from the Torah on a scroll, and they put that in the water with some dirt from the floor, and she drinks this water, and the priest admonishes her and says, if you committed adultery, if you're guilty, these waters are going to kill you. And she says, Amen, Amen. So why is she saying Amen twice? Right? So she says Amen on the curse, as she accepts the curse upon herself if she is guilty. And she says Amen on the oath, as she declares that she is innocent, that she has not committed adultery, that she is not defiled. She says, Amen if I committed adultery with this man about whom I was warned. Amen if I committed adultery with another man. Like once you're brought to be an adult, as a sotah, even though it was about one particular man that you were warned, this wife is now going to have to swear that she didn't commit adultery with any man. And if she did, she shouldn't take this oath. And she also is saying, Amen, that I did not stray when I was betrothed to my husband, nor after I was married to him, nor as a widow awaiting for my yavam to perform levirate marriage to me, before I was married to this man, since a woman at that stage is also prohibited from engaging in sexual intercourse with any men, nor when married through levirate marriage to the yavam. In other words, once she's brought to this situation of having to swear that she didn't commit adultery with the particular man that her husband warned her about, she's also asked to swear that she never committed adultery. So you see there's an extension of the oath that she normally would not have had to take at all. Once you're in that situation of taking an oath, maybe you can be forced, this would seem to be the source for that, to take an oath about other things, right? And it's almost like, right, what the prototypical case that we're really talking about here is, I lend John $100, right? And John says, well, I admit that you lent me $50 and I paid it back, but I do not admit that you lent me $100. I only admit that you lent me $50. So in that situation, I would take him to a rabbinic court and he would have to take an oath to say, because it's only my word against his, and since he made a partial admission, he would have to swear an oath that he only borrowed $50 and not the full $100. So the question is, could I then make him swear that you never borrowed $50 from me, a different $50 from me at any other time, right? So maybe what I meant that I lent you $100 is I lent you $50 last week and I lent you $50 last year that you never paid back. And now you're saying, oh, he only lent me $100. Well, I'm saying, well, you swear that I never in all time lent you the $100, right? So that would be swearing an oath beyond what's on the table. And that's why they're brewing it in this context, where the defendant is admitting, that there was this purchase and sale with regard to movable property, but not with regard to real property. And normally cases involving real property, because they're so well documented, don't lead to oaths of partial admission. Only movable property cases do. Now, the Gemara analyzes this law. What are the circumstances with regard to this betrothed woman if we say that he warned her not to seclude herself with a particular man when she was betrothed, right? Before they were married, when they were merely betrothed, and he gives her the bitter water of a sotah to drink when she is betrothed, if the couple has only reached the point of betrothal, and she secludes herself with some other guy, and her betrothed man, they're not fully married yet, they're just betrothed, and he says, don't seclude yourself with that guy, and then she does. So can this couple that is only betrothed and not yet married, do they go down to Jerusalem and do the waters of the sotah? Does this apply to them? But didn't we learn in a Mishna on page 23b? With regard to a betrothed woman who secluded herself with another man after being warned by her betrothed, and a widow waiting for her yavam to perform levirate marriage who secluded herself with another man after being warned by her yavam, they neither drink the bitter water nor collect payment of their marriage contracts. And what is the reason for this? The merciful one states as part of her oath, the oath of the sotah, but if you have gone aside, being under your husband, in Numbers 5:20, and that does not apply here, as these women are not yet under their husband's authority, right? So a sotah only drinks the water when she's warned by her husband, that she's fully married to, not just betrothed. Rather, one must say that he warned her when she was betrothed, he warned her when she was betrothed not to seclude herself with a particular man. And she secluded herself with that man when she was betrothed. And he gave her the water to drink when they were married. So the Gemara asks, but in this case, does the water she is given to drink examine her and cause her death? Doesn't the merciful one states, and the man shall be clear from iniquity? And this verse indicates when the man is clear from iniquity, the water examines his wife. But if the man is not clear from iniquity with regard to the matter of illicit sexual intercourse, the water does not examine his wife, right? A man who is suspicious of his wife and brings her down to Jerusalem to, take the oath that she has not cheated on him, if he cheated on her, the waters of the sotah don't work. Now, why is that relevant here? If a man was and a woman were betrothed, and she had some conversation behind closed doors with some guy, and he said to her, "Don't seclude yourself with that man," and then she did, and then he married her, right? The betrothed man married his betrothed, wife to be. Well, now that they've married, what does it mean? To marriage, they're going to have to consummate the union. So that means that he slept with his wife after he warned her not to seclude herself with a man, and she did, and then, she became eligible to be a sotah, to be a suspected adulteress. The point is, after a husband and wife enter the status that she's a sotah, she's a suspected adulteress because she was warned, she's secluded in front of witnesses, they become prohibited to each other. So if they're in a status of being prohibited to each other, and while they're in that status, they get married, then the husband violated the Torah prohibition, and the waters of the sotah won't examine her, and so they don't do that ritual. So, I'm almost done. Questions or comments, get them in now. So rather, it is clear that this oath is administered by means of an extension, right? This is the proof that she does have to swear that she didn't cheat while betrothed, but that is by means of the extension, right? So she becomes a sotah because they were fully married, and he became suspicious of her, warned her not to seclude herself with a particular man. She secluded herself with that particular man. Then they became prohibited to each other. They went to Jerusalem. Now she takes the oath. But when she takes the oath, she has to swear not only that she didn't cheat with that particular man, but with any man, and not only while she and her husband were married, but even while she was betrothed to him. And it might be, I don't know, even while she was married to a previous husband or betrothed to a previous husband. That I'm not sure. But at any rate, she has to swear that she didn't commit adultery while she was betrothed to this husband. That is definitely outside the scope of this sotah situation, but it is an oath by extension. So this would seem to be a proof that one, who makes, that's the source for the law that we know is the law in our Mishna, that one who sells both movable property by means of real property, and then there's a partial admission, yeah, I sold you the movable property, but not the real property, will have to swear an oath about the real property, even though normally he would not have to do that. Okay, that's where we knock off, and we'll continue tomorrow, Sunday, at the regular Sunday time of 6 p.m. Pacific. Let's check some questions and comments on Kiddushin 27. Load Google Doc. Load. There we go. Jonathan. In this section and the last few, I was thinking about the purpose of receipts. An acknowledgement that money was paid and the goods were transferred. Maybe it comes from this and not just some accounting rules or something for someone to check as you walk out the door. If I think about the world of Hashem, who gives the commandments so that we can fulfill them in all the things we do, even trivial transactions, even making sure things are transferred properly, brings peace into the world. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful thought. I was actually thinking, and I was going to mention, and I didn't. I'm so glad you reminded me. You know, there is this. There's a, I don't call it a bias. Like there's a kind of thought in our culture, in society, that matters of money are unseemly. That spiritual things are above money. Spiritual things are beyond money. People who like to talk about money or focus on money are a little bit crass and sort of outside the respectable sphere because of their undue attention to money. Not to mention, and this is besides the fact that we'd all like to, not worry about money, but still somehow we're a little bit uncomfortable talking about money. And you could even say that this feeds into, tragic old stereotypes that Jews are all about money. Is that all you could talk about, money? Okay. There is definitely a relationship between money and spirituality if money is handled with spiritual intention, shall we say, right? And this exists in many different contexts. The first one that comes to mind is tithing, right? So everything that comes into you, every kind of income, you're supposed to tithe it. Now, that's not only true in ancient times when the tithe was given to Levites and to the poor, and Meiser Sheni's second tithe, so you could go to Jerusalem for the festival when the temple was standing. That still exists today. You've heard me mention this many times. You should have a Meiser account, right? You should have a tithe account, which means that whenever you have income, you immediately transfer 10%. It's 10% of net, how you calculate net, whatever, but that's not really important. The point is you transfer 10% of the money you're actually going to receive, for your work in the world or interest on money you have, etc. And that's your charity account. And you don't have to be a rich person at all to have a charity account. And then from your charity account, you know that everything that goes into it needs to be distributed to the charitable causes that you believe in. Education, food for the food insecure, and shelter for the shelter insecure, etc. So that way, Hashem, God, becomes your business partner in everything that you do, because the more money you make, the more you're automatically going to give away to charity. In other contexts where this is so, one of the first questions you'll be asked, I think it's the first question, the Talmud teaches elsewhere, I think it was in Tractate Brachas, the first question you'll be asked when you as a soul leave this world and return to the world of souls from where you came is, were you honest in your business dealings? And what that really refers to is those little rounding errors that we all tend to make in our own favor when no one's looking and we know no one's ever going to see it. A righteous person says, I have my obligations to other people are superseded by my obligations to God. I owe other people to be honest with them. But the reason I'm going to be meticulously honest is because of my relationship with the Holy One above. And I want to be sure that if there's a possibility that I'm making a rounding error in my favor, I'm going to make the rounding error in the favor of people I owe money to, that my business dealings will be scrupulously honest down to the last detail, right? And in that way, you bundle your whole enterprise in this world, right? Not only your family relationships, not only your prayer relationships, not only the old lady that you're going to help across the street, which obviously, feels like a more spiritual practice, but everything you're going to do is all going to be tied up in living a righteous and spiritual life, including everything financial that comes through your hands. So don't be afraid to talk about finances when your goal is to make sure that your finances are being handled in a meticulously righteous manner. Ifa, is there any method comparable to the sotah except pertaining to the husband? How is he tried for faithfulness and or sexual purity? I mean, it's a great question, right? The Torah doesn't say that there's an examination of the husband, and the reason is because under Torah law, a husband could have more than one wife, right? So if he's having extramarital sex, it's definitely cheating, and for the last 1,000 years, by rabbinic law, there is no bigamy, right? You can't have more than one wife. So they're not going to go further and say, and create a sotah ritual by rabbinic law, especially in a period in history where there is no temple anyway. But know that it is so that a husband is prohibited. It's just that sotah ritual of examining the husband doesn't exist under Torah law. And it's consistent with the fact that under Torah law, a man could have more than one wife. So that's just kind of the way it developed historically. So that's what I have for us tonight. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Sunday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. I may go live. I'm not sure if I'm going to go live later tonight on Facebook or not. Maybe I'm just going to make a good recording of that music that I can use, for our opening music here on the show. Have a great